presidents are doing. What's your very brief assessment of what you're seeing?
Thanks for having me, Krista. Very colourful indeed, everything that we've been seeing in terms of how governments across the continent are addressing this crisis. I think that the ones who really have been getting it right have focused on, having the right timing, having a balanced approach and being factual. It's unfortunate that there are those who are taking this to be a political opportunity to gain points against the opposition or whatever the case may be. But there are governments, and I think the majority of our governments are doing a really, really great job.
I mean, as Shindai touched on there, not just Shindai actually, there was a Zimbabwean, who raised that point about trust. How do you go about building trust within your citizens and balancing that with, you're going to have to hear some bad news here?
Absolutely, and I think the issue of trust, just as in with any relationship really, focuses on 3 points. I think the first one is don't lie. Be factual about the information that you're sharing. Make sure that you can back up whatever you're saying with scientific data where possible. The second one is really to be specific. I think I really like what President Cyril Ramaphosa has been doing in South Africa, where every engagement has been about a specific topic that really helps to cut down on speculation. It makes sure that people have a little bit of a sense, especially in this very insecure environment, of what to expect from government when government does speak.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to try and get on to how to do it right. Many of us now are very familiar with these dashboards that we're seeing. I mean, we've got one here at BBC World News that shows the latest statistics. Is that the right way to do it? Do people get engaged with that?
I think in certain settings, yes, they do. But, I think what we do have to keep in mind is that in Africa, the proliferation of television is still quite low. So looking at the media in which you're communicating, radio is still the #1 means of reaching our people, especially in the rural areas. So in terms of media, radio is the way to go. In terms of formats, I've seen some really interesting things as well. Soap operas are one way of reaching people and starting to change perceptions that eventually change to, lead to a change in behavior. I've also seen there's a young man called Misale in Nairobi that's been using murals and graffiti in the slums of Nairobi to be able to incentivize people towards change. Harambe has been working with government and doing a really great job here in South Africa. They have a comic book called Bona Corona that they've launched, and they've been able to diversify that specific format into WhatsApp messages. They also have a radio show. So format is really important. And I think lastly, indigenous languages. Not everybody in Africa speaks English, French, or Portuguese. So being able to meet your audience at a point of impact where they can really capture a message and be able to act on it, you have to speak in their language. So I think those are important things to consider.
It's fascinating that you mentioned radio, because this is the aspect of connectivity on the continent, isn't it? And we've been following this campaign by Angelique Kidjo and UNICEF, and this was all about getting the message across through song, through radio. When it comes to influencers and to voices, what difference does it make? Because, are we talking about a celebrity here?
I'm glad that you brought up the issue of influencers, because influencers are not always who or what we think they are. In Western culture, we think of influencers as celebrities, sports stars, etc. But I think in our context in Africa, your next door neighbor could be an influencer, a family member could be an influencer, but also in the rural setting, chiefs of villages could be influencers. So I think it takes a little bit of strategic thinking to think about, who are the influencers in a particular setting, especially on the continent, as complex as Africa is.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because there's been such anger towards Bill Gates, because he's been kind of leading the way on a vaccination development. But I just want to touch very quickly on an issue that's been very pertinent to Africa, and that is the malaise of fake news, myths, misinformation. How on earth, as a government or an organisation, do you counter counter that?
I think they've done a really great job in some contexts. In South Africa, there are fines, so being able to take the legal route essentially and impose fines on those who are proliferating fake news and myths, etc., which is very dangerous at this time. And then having to be able to follow that up with enforcement of these rules. And then there are others that have kind of gone the other extreme. I know that in Egypt, for example, once you're past a certain number of followers on social media, you have to register as a media entity. So that might be a bit of extreme, but I think in circumstances like this, I wouldn't say that they've gone too far because it's dangerous.
Really, Glinda, we could have had so much to talk about, but thank you very much for your insight there. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is, of course,